Hey, what's up, everybody? You're listening to the Enterprise Architecture Radio. If you're thinking about organizational complexity and agility, if you're concerned about operational efficiencies and thinking of taking it to the next level, if managing innovation is one of your priorities, you've come to the right place. On this podcast, we talk about all of that and more. It's a jungle out there, and we'll attempt to navigate this jungle of frameworks, methods, and most importantly, enterprise architecture in practice. A very happy new year to all my listeners. I hope you had restful, peaceful holidays, and I hope that you're geared up for the new year ahead of us. We are a enterprise architecture podcast, and this is the first podcast of the year. So it only makes sense that we talk about technical trends. Let's start with the big obvious item, future of work. Many organizations around the world are changing the way that they were working before. For a long period of time, it was working from home for everyone, or at least everyone that could work from home. Of course, there were some frontline workers who had to be there where they had to be. But now things are changing, and there is a new hybrid model in place. It is expected that the employees start to come back to work at least 2 or 3 days in a week. Every organization has implemented a different version of the hybrid work environment, but that's not what I'm going to be talking about. There are a number of other changes that this entire 2020 pandemic and the new hybrid work environment and the work from home environment and all of this has brought in. And I'll talk about a few of those changes. The first change that I can think of is quiet quitting and quiet hiring. We've all heard about quiet quitting. It was a topic that was making the rounds on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. For those who haven't heard quiet quitting, what it really means is when someone loses the motivation or inspiration and only does the absolute basic minimum that he needs to do to survive at his job. They never try to go above and beyond and do an excellent job that they could have if they would have been motivated. And this has happened because of the new pandemic situation where people are working from home. They're not collaborating enough. They're not meeting with their colleagues. They're not engaged properly. The new concept that has come along is quiet hiring. What this means is that people who are not quiet quitting, people who are going above and beyond and performing better are given more money, more time, more attention, more promotions, more growth, etc., etc. When you look at it first, it might appear to you that quiet hiring is the answer to quiet quitting, which means that if an employee is performing better than an average employee, then he should be given better bonuses, better results. And under normal circumstances, this might be true. But this quiet quitting is as big a pandemic as COVID itself. Because of the new work environments that we saw in 2020 and 2021, and even this year in 2022, people have lost the motivation to work because they're working in isolation, they're not meeting with their colleagues, they're not collaborating, they're not having proper discussions. So the leaders of the organization have a responsibility to improve the engagement between the colleagues. Does that mean that they should bring everybody back into office? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there is a real long-term effort required by the leaders to improve the engagement between the employees. And doing quiet hiring, which is essentially promoting and giving bigger hikes and bonuses to people who are going above and beyond, is not sufficient. What this will do is people who have done the quiet quitting, people who have lost the motivation, it'll demotivate and demoralize them even further, ultimately creating an environment where there is not sufficient team effort. But from a future of work perspective, not everything was bad about this pandemic. The pandemic forced us to work on our collaboration technologies, whether it's Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever it might be. And people have also started imagining things such as augmented reality and the metaverse to improve the remote working situation. And this might actually have proven to be an opportunity more than a challenge. Now, there are some new and interesting changes we might have seen in the last couple of years, which I would like to talk about a little bit because of this new remote working, hybrid working situation that we are in. There are many employees who suddenly discovered that there's a lot that they can do when they're working from home, especially because nobody was monitoring them and people started moonlighting, picking up other activities that would earn them some financial income on the side. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing and I'm not saying it's a good thing either. I'm just saying it's a change. People have started finding alternative sources of income. The extra time that they saved because of the sudden disappearance of travel to work and travel back home. Now, if you really ask me, it takes me at least 1 hour to drive to work and then 1.5 hours, depending upon what time I'm leaving, to drive back home. That's 2.5 to 3 hours of travel time saved if I'm working from home. 3-4 hours of travel time every single day, if you are able to save, that's quite a lot of time in your hands. And people started getting creative about what to do with that time. And that has created a new change in people. There are cases where people have started doing 2 jobs, getting 2 salaries, and that is, I personally feel, not very ethical. But if you look at another statistical reality, especially in India, that the number of broker accounts that have opened up in the last 2 years is tremendous. People have started investing, people have started trading, even in advanced trading concepts like options and futures and what have you. I'm not sure whether it is an income because I'm not sure whether everybody is successful in what it is that they are doing, but it's definitely another source of income that people have come up with. On the other hand, organizations have also started looking at non-traditional candidates. What that means is previously they used to hire candidates that had the credentials and the relevant experience that they needed. Now the situation has changed and people are looking at whether a person would be capable of delivering a certain task for which he's being hired. So organizations are giving less importance to traditional educational qualifications and relevant experience that they used to before. They're giving more importance to their current capability of being able to deliver a certain task, which also means that they might hire people on a temporary basis, on a project-to-project basis. And on the other hand, non-traditional candidates have also started preferring these kind of roles. So a number of other changes have also come in. There is trauma and mental health issues that people are seeing in the last 2 years quite a bit because of the social isolation, especially the younger generation that just passed out of colleges and were recruited during the pandemic in a remote working situation. Well, some of the young candidates have actually not even gone to college in the last 2 years. They've done their most part of their education remotely. And many of them complain that they're not prepared for a work environment. They even joined jobs remotely, got their laptops at home and what have you. And because of the social isolation, they're not being able to collaborate, they're not being able to do teamwork, and that's a real issue. Other than that, there have been other mental health and trauma issues that employees of existing organizations have faced. And this is another trend that I think organizations will see, which is creating an environment where employees get proactive rest. They are able to plan their leaves ahead of time before there is a mental breakdown, like meeting-free Fridays or pre-planned holidays and so on. I think the one-on-one meetings that leaders have with their employees is going to increase. And of course, every organization will have to have a trauma counseling kind of an environment, a phone number where they can call in case if they feel sad or depressed or what have you. Also, diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's another thing that's slowly changing. I was reading a Gartner article that says that about 46% of the employees think that the diversity and inclusion strategies that organizations employ are not fair and are not justified. They're not very happy. There is some resistance against diversity and inclusion. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I'm not going to take sides here. Although I do feel that diversity and inclusion is a very good best practice, as long as it is a best practice. I have seen leaders that have taken this too far and made it a objective and made it a target. And when you start putting targets that, okay, 50% of our, let's say, leadership team has to be diversity candidates, in such situations, yes, employees who do not fall into the diversity category may feel that the promotions that are happening are not fair enough or are not justified or what have you. And I am a strong believer of meritocracy, and I am a strong believer of equal opportunities. So I believe that diversity, equity, and inclusion should be a best practice. It should be a culture that is imbibed into every leader, but it is not necessarily a metric. That's all about future of work. There are a couple of other trends that I think that businesses are going to see, that the current situation, especially the pandemic situation, has enforced upon it. One of them, for example, is supply chain, whether it is procurement, manufacturing, distribution, inventory, or especially the last mile delivery. Things have changed quite a lot in the last 2 years. Last mile delivery, specifically because of the pandemic situation, people have started ordering stuff at home. They don't go out to shop that much, and that has put a tremendous amount of pressure on the last mile delivery. And organizations that were into this kind of business, whether it's Amazon or whether it's food delivery organizations or what have you, they've become very, very innovative about how they're going to be changing and innovating around the last mile delivery. So that's something that has changed tremendously and is going to continue to change for businesses where it is relevant. Another thing that's a strong trend that I believe that we are going to see is cyber security. And I probably should have put this up there because this is also a very important one. Why cyber security? Well, Internet of Things to begin with, right? We are seeing more and more sensors. We are seeing more and more edge devices that are getting smarter and that are generating tremendous amounts of data. Number of internet connected devices, I have been predicting, is going to run into trillions very soon. And if you look at some of the videos that I've had a talk with the Open Group a couple of years ago, and it should be available on the YouTube. I've talked about this, and it is, and all my predictions so far have sort of come true. And the number of internet connected devices, whether it's sensors, whether it's smartphones, mobile devices, what have you, is going to continue to increase in numbers, which will put tremendous amount of pressure on how we are securing these things, how we are managing all this data. And the work from home situation that we have these days is also going to put a tremendous amount of pressure on cybersecurity, considering we've got personal devices that are going to connect to our networks, and it's difficult to keep track of how we are going to be managing those personal devices, what other native applications are going to be installed on those devices. Phishing, spoofing, all this becomes much easier for hackers when they're dealing with personal devices. Also, work from home situations. There's a large younger generation of populace that has joined organizations during the pandemic, always working remotely. And the contact and the communication that we have with our colleagues has drastically reduced. So we don't really recognize the people that we are working with, which means if somebody approaches us saying they are a colleague, it's easier for us to be fooled, or it is more difficult for us to really authenticate whether that person who we are talking to is really our colleague or not, and that opens up opportunities for hackers. Machine learning algorithms have started playing a very, very important role when it comes to cybersecurity. So we've got machine learning algorithms that can examine vast amounts of data that is moving across our networks, and that too in real time, and they're far more effective than human beings ever could be, and they can learn to recognize patterns that indicate any kind of cybersecurity threat, right? So earlier we used to have human hackers, and there were human cybersecurity experts who were basically combating with each other, and then now human hackers are combating against AI, which basically changes the trend a little bit. But then again, hackers are also getting intelligent and have started using artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms to hack into systems. So really, it's now AI versus AI. That's going to be a trend that we are going to be seeing now. Is it a good thing, bad thing? I'm not here to talk about that, but it's something that is eventually inevitable. Is it going to happen this year in 2023, or is it going to happen the next year? We don't know that, but it's definitely coming. So if you really think about it, cybersecurity is not really the job of a security team within your organization anymore, right? It's not just the CSO who is responsible for cybersecurity anymore. Cybersecurity has become everybody's job because everybody's now interacting with Internet of Things. Everybody's now interacting with our official networks using personal devices, and everybody needs to be more careful as to how they're managing their data and how they're protecting themselves from cybersecurity threats. Another important trend that I see coming is data. There's a tremendous amount of data that is being generated by every single person around the world who's connected to the internet today. There's an organization called Statista that reports that every person creates 97 zettabytes of data by the end of the calendar year, within 1 year. And what zettabytes means is, when I say 97 zettabytes, I would take 97 and I'd put 21 zeros behind that 97. That's how much data is being generated by every single person within a year. Think about the amounts of data that is being generated on a year-on-year basis. It is an incredible opportunity to capture, analyze, and apply this data for better business results. So if you're into retail, for example, you could take all of this data that is available to you on the internet and use it for your own business results. Metaverse or virtual reality is going to continue to remain a hype. If you've heard my previous podcasts, I've talked about it. I do not think that it still has any real business use case that can justify the cost except video games, because there are a group of people who would pay large amounts of money to get that augmented experience. But other than that, if you really look at business case and an enterprise standpoint, I don't think metaverse is going to be big. Not this year, at least. Maybe in a couple of years, we might find some interesting use cases. But at this point in time, it still remains a hype. Artificial intelligence. ChatGPT is in. I'm using it more and more. I'm asking it questions more and more. It answers my philosophical questions. It answers my technical questions. It helps me more and more in my job. So that's very interesting. It has incredible business uses. Just as a test, I asked ChatGPT to write the source code in Python for me to build a balanced binary tree. And this was one of the tests that I gave a really long time back when I was studying my advanced computing. And it took less than 15 seconds for ChatGPT to not only write the code, but also to explain to me how it's written the code and what each part of the code is. And that is just a very, very small example. You can ask it questions about how you can implement AI operations to improve your incident management responses and turnaround times and so on, and it'll give you a right answer. You can ask it about tools, you can ask it about technologies, you can ask it about... In fact, there are people who are using ChatGPT to talk to someone about mental health. People are talking to ChatGPT when they are depressed. Can you believe it? AI Ops, by the way, is going to be... I think it's on the verge of a breakthrough. So more and more organizations are going to start implementing AI Ops. AI for procurement, artificial intelligence algorithms that will tell you when it's the right time to buy raw materials. Artificial intelligence for cost control, how can you reduce costs? Artificial intelligence for faster return of investments. Looking at your current footprint and landscape and being able to tell you how you can improve your return of investments. Artificial intelligence for security, like I already talked about, right? Machine learning models that can monitor your network traffic and identify patterns of cybersecurity threat. All these things are going to play a very important role, and I think we are going to see some trends in these areas. Next interesting topic that I think we'll see some, and I don't know if we'll really see something happening in this area, but I would love to see something happen in this area. And this is multi-cloud. Today, we see there are 3 or 4 major players when it comes to cloud. There's obviously AWS, and then there's Microsoft Azure, and then there's Google Cloud, and then of course there's the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. And then there are some other players like Ali Cloud and so on. Most businesses are on AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud, and majority of them are already on multi-cloud. But the multi-cloud that exists today is fragmented and broken. right? We've got some applications on Azure, some other applications on AWS, or some organizations are using one cloud vendor or one cloud provider for infrastructure as a service and another cloud provider for platform as a service, and so on and so forth. A true multi-cloud environment would be when the cloud vendor is transparent to me. If I want to host an application on the cloud, I would try to see what are the services that I require. And most of the cloud services are available on all cloud providers. So if you need a database, you could get a database on Azure, you can get a database on AWS as well. So it shouldn't really matter whether I am hosting my database on AWS or Azure. For one application, I could host it on AWS. For the other application, I could host it on Azure, depending upon what's the deal that the vendor is giving me. But that's just the beginning. I could have my production environment on AWS and QA and dev environment on Azure, or the other way around. I could have my application server on AWS and my database server on Azure, and so on and so forth. So there are so many different scenarios and use cases that I could have. And what I really need at this point in time is a framework that allows me to make my cloud vendors completely transparent. I should be able to pick and choose services between multi-clouds and host my applications, host my data loads wherever it's suitable for me. That is a true multi-cloud framework that I would like to see come up in the year 2023. Now, I've been doing some research. There are a few patterns and frameworks that I have seen, but they're not there yet. Of course, there is other frameworks which are not really specifically for multi-cloud environments that I am talking about, but they are also advancements in the areas of hyperscalers and other areas. Like you've got sovereign clouds, which essentially is around where the data is going to be stored. So European Union is working on, or European countries are working on building sovereign clouds that will essentially control where the data resides. There are local zone clouds, which are essentially around edge computing. So if you see that if your application is a low latency application that requires quicker responses under single digit millisecond responses, then you would have to go with local zone clouds, which is a service that is available with AWS and other cloud providers as well. And then, of course, there are zero carbon clouds, which are around using renewable energy to power the cloud infrastructure, and a couple of other things like trying to prolong the life of the physical hardware that is being used to build the public clouds, and so on and so forth. So there are a few other frameworks that we will also see as trends coming up in 2023. And finally, last but not the least, data analytics. Now, I see data analytics being split into, three different fields, and each one we are going to see develop at a tremendous rate in the next couple of years, if not in 2023. One is predictive analytics, looking at data analytics and being able to predict where it's going. Second is data visualization. So we're going to see more augmented visualizations, especially with the metaverse coming in. Although I do still feel that the devices required for augmented reality and virtual reality are a bit too expensive, and I don't know if it makes sense. But definitely we are going to see more augmented data visualizations as we move into 2023 and probably next year, 2024. And we are going to see developments in the areas of real-time data mining, which is also a very interesting field we should look at. So very, very interesting times. Of course, I've taken a lot of time today. My podcast has been especially long, and it's not specifically around enterprise architecture today, but it's about tech trends. And this is the first podcast of the year, so I didn't want to really leave out anything that I feel strongly about, so I tried to cover as much as possible. Well, exciting times ahead. I hope you have as much fun as I am going to have looking at these technologies develop and grow, and I find it very, very interesting. I hope you have a beautiful 2023 and have fun. That's all I have for you today, folks. I hope you enjoyed the show. More about organizational agility, innovation, and enterprise architecture in the practical world in the business right here on the show. But before I end the show, I want you to help me out with this one little thing. Pause the show and share this podcast via WhatsApp or text message with at least one person who might be interested in the show. It could be anyone, your colleague, your boss, someone in your team. That's all I ask. Just one share with one message via text or WhatsApp or any social media of your choice, and it would go a long way in supporting this podcast and growing its listener base. Also, please don't forget to follow the podcast. That way, you will get notified when we publish a new episode. If you want to find out more about us, you can find us at enterprisearchitectureradio.com. If you have any ideas, thoughts, disagreements, please feel free to write to me directly. We also have a Telegram group if you would like to contribute to EA discussions or what have you. Just search for Enterprise Architecture Radio on Telegram, or the URL to join the group is https://t.me/Enterprise Architecture Radio. While our contact details are there in the show notes, we are very easy to find. Just search for Enterprise Architecture Radio anywhere. Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, even Discord. Although I just got started with Discord and don't know how to use it very well, but nevertheless, once again, I hope you had fun, and I'll see you in the next one.